right, welcome back everyone to Chapters Unfolded. This is episode 19, and we're continuing our deep dive into atomic habits. So if you're joining us for the first time, Chapters Unfolded is a space where we really explore ideas in depth from books, from research, and all sorts of different sources to try to really pull out some of the gems and golden nuggets and insights.
Yeah, absolutely.
So have you ever looked at somebody and thought, how do they make that look so easy? Or
Right.
how come that just seems to come so natural to them?
All the time.
Right.
All the time.
And so today we are going to be talking about something that might change the way you think about your own habits, your own successes.
Yeah,
And it's this idea of genetics.
that's right. You shared the chapter called The Truth About Talent, When Genes Matter and When They Don't. And it really, I think, makes you reconsider the foundation upon which your habits are built. We often hear about willpower and discipline, but this chapter kind of nudges us to think about the inherent aspects that we each bring to the table.
Yeah, it's like you're not necessarily predetermined, but it's almost like you're playing a game on a certain map and understanding what are the parameters of that map,
Exactly.
right? What are the edges of that map so you can best navigate it, right?
Yeah, and some maps are more favorable to different types of players.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly. And so this deep dive is going to be all about how your inherent traits interact with your capacity to form and maintain these habits. And if this kind of in-depth exploration is something that you're into, make sure you subscribe to Chapters Unfolded so you don't miss any of our future dives.
Definitely.
And also leave a comment. Tell us what you think about this stuff. Or if you have any questions, and of course, share this content with anyone you think would like it too. That's how this community grows. So as the title of this chapter suggests, it's not just saying that your genes equal your destiny,
Right.
right? It's more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is, when do those genetic factors play a significant role, and when do they take a backseat to other factors?
Right. And the examples right at the start of Michael Phelps and Hicham El Guerrouj really bring this into focus, I think.
Absolutely. So you have two phenomenal athletes, both operating at the very pinnacle of their sport, yet their physical builds are dramatically different.
Right.
So the fact that a swimmer like Phelps and a runner like El Guerrouj, despite such a significant height disparity, have the same inseam,
Wild.
it's mind-blowing, right? And so it really highlights how specific body types can give a natural advantage in certain physical pursuits.
It's choosing the right field of competition, right? It's
Right.
not just raw athletic ability, it's how well your physical structure aligns with the demands of that particular sport.
Exactly.
Imagine for a moment Phelps trying to excel as an elite long-distance runner carrying all that extra muscle mass,
Oh my God.
or El Guerrouj, trying to compete in Olympic swimming.
Against those long torsos and those long reaches.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
you can almost picture it and see the immense uphill battle they would face, even with the most rigorous training regimen imaginable. It's
Yeah.
like the odds are stacked against you.
Exactly.
Right. And this isn't just limited to physical attributes.
Right, which I think is a crucial takeaway for our listeners.
Yes.
The chapter expands on this idea to include mental characteristics as well, and it emphasizes that competence in any area is highly dependent on the specific context.
Right. It's not like, oh, you're smart, so you're going to be good at everything.
Exactly.
Right. It's like, oh, you're good with numbers.
Right.
You're probably going to be good at math.
Yeah, you might have a knack for understanding the intricacies of habit formation, but that doesn't automatically make you an expert in, intricate knitting or theoretical astrophysics,
Yeah.
right?
And what's really fascinating, too, is that when it comes to habits, those that require more skill
Right.
and resilience, these inherent mental tendencies that we have
Right.
can really influence how readily those habits take hold and how rewarding those habits feel,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the chapter even delves into the field of behavioral genetics.
which is really fascinating. And it turns out that genes can influence a wide array of behaviors and tendencies. And it really makes you ponder how these underlying genetic inclinations, might be subtly shaping the types of habits that we naturally gravitate towards or find easier to maintain in our daily lives.
Yeah, and then, it goes on to discuss the big 5 personality traits and how they are rooted in biology as well.
Right.
So you have this connection between your genes, your inherent personality, and the types of habits that you form.
Right. And I think it's important for our listeners to understand that while these personality traits aren't set in stone, your genetic makeup provides a certain initial leaning in one direction or another.
I like that initial leaning. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, you're going to be this way,
Right.
but you're probably,
You have a propensity
yeah, you have a
to
propensity.
go this way or that way.
Exactly. And so if you're someone who naturally tends to score lower on conscientiousness,
Right.
the book's reminder about the importance of like strategic environment design
Right.
to help you stay organized
Absolutely.
becomes even more important for you.
And I think that's a really practical takeaway for our listeners.
Yes.
It's about finding ways to work with your inherent tendencies rather
Yeah.
than constantly battling against them, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
And the chapter really emphasizes tailoring your habits to align with your individual personality. If you find rock climbing, far more enjoyable than traditional bodybuilding, then designing your exercise routine around rock climbing makes perfect sense.
Right.
If a low-fat dietary approach feels more sustainable for you than a low-carb one, that's the path you should explore,
Right.
The crucial element is identifying the version of the habit that brings you genuine joy and satisfaction, because those are the habits that are far more likely to stick long-term.
Yeah. And then that kind of brings us to this idea of finding or creating a game where the odds are tilted in your favor. So
Yeah.
the chapter talks about how you're naturally going to enjoy activities that come to you with relative ease. And when you're proficient at something, you tend to get positive reinforcement,
Right.
which then fuels this positive cycle of motivation and continued progress.
I love that. And it really, I think, speaks to the explore-exploit trade-off
Oh, yeah.
that's discussed in the book, right?
Right.
Initially, it involves experimenting, casting a wide net, seeing what truly resonates with you,
Right.
what feels like it aligns with your natural aptitudes and interests.
Like if you're trying a bunch of different hobbies.
Exactly.
Or learning
Or
new...
learning new subjects when you're first starting out.
Right.
It's like trying a bunch of things and seeing what sticks.
Exactly. And then as you start to identify the areas where you're making faster progress,
Right.
where things feel less like a struggle, that's when you can kind of double down and refine your habits in those areas.
I love that.
But I think it's also important to note that you should always kind of maintain that exploration.
Right.
Because your circumstances in life, your interests can evolve over time.
Absolutely. And I love the questions that the chapter suggests, asking yourself during that initial exploration phase, what feels like fun to me, but work to others.
Yeah.
It encourages you to think about those activities where you lose track of time, where you seem to achieve better results with less effort than others.
That's huge.
Yeah, or simply what feels intrinsically natural and authentic to you.
Yeah, those are really good questions to
Absolutely.
kind of reflect on and
Yeah.
set aside all the external pressures.
Right.
Like, what does society tell you should be doing?
Exactly.
Right? What are your parents telling you should be
What are
doing?
your friends doing?
What are your friends doing?
Yeah.
Set all that aside and just like,
What energizes you?
yeah, what do you naturally gravitate
Right.
towards? And then it kind of talks about how there's an element of chance. You're born with certain predispositions. You happen to be in an environment where those are valued.
Right.
But if you can't find a game where the odds are in your favor,
You can create one.
you can create one. And this is where the example of Scott Adams really shines, I think.
It does.
So he wasn't the most exceptional artist.
Right.
He wasn't the most hilarious comedian.
Uh-huh.
But he combined those skills
Right.
with his background in the business world
Uh-huh.
and was able to carve out this really unique niche
Absolutely.
where he could excel with Dilbert. And that's something that I think we can all learn from.
Yeah, it's leveraging that unique blend of skills and interest to reduce direct competition and make yourself stand out in a particular area.
And so you might not be like the most naturally gifted in a very general area,
Right.
but by focusing on a super specific category, you can strive to be like the best in that specific niche.
Right. It's almost like the potato and the egg analogy that he uses.
Yes.
You can't change whether you're inherently a potato or an egg,
Right.
but you can certainly choose to engage in activities where your particular hardness or softness is an advantage.
Exactly. So what does all this mean for our listeners when it comes to building better habits? It's not about using your genetics as an excuse or feeling limited by them.
Right.
Your genes don't negate the need to work hard.
Exactly.
They just give you clues about where to direct that effort
Absolutely.
for the maximum impact
And satisfaction.
and satisfaction.
Yeah.
And so gaining an understanding of your inherent strengths can help you channel your energy
Right.
towards opportunities where you're more likely to find fulfillment and success.
It's about aligning your ambitions with your natural abilities, as the chapter says.
Exactly.
And I think ultimately for our listeners, it's far more productive to focus on realizing your own unique potential rather than engaging in constant comparisons with others.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, everybody has certain limits.
Right.
And most of us don't push ourselves hard enough to even find out where those limits are.
Right.
And so you can't really assess if you've been dealt a good hand or a bad hand until you've actually put in the work.
Exactly. You
Right.
got to play the game.
You got to play the game. And so the key takeaway here is that your talents and your genetics, they play a role, but they primarily help you figure out where your opportunities are.
Right.
They don't dictate your destiny.
You don't define your destiny.
It's really about actively seeking out or creating a game
Mhm.
where
I
if you leverage your skills and your inclinations,
Yeah.
the odds are slightly in your favor.
And I think it's about maintaining that balance between exploration and exploitation
Yes.
as a continuous strategy for discovering the right habits
Right.
and the right fields of endeavor that are best suited to you.
Exactly. And, you might get some guidance from your genes, but they don't take away from that need for hard work.
Right.
And so ultimately, the focus should be on becoming the most accomplished version of yourself,
Exactly.
not trying to be a carbon copy of somebody else.
And this raises, I think, an interesting question for our listeners to ponder as we wrap up this episode. Considering what you've learned about the influence of your inherent traits and tendencies, what is one small habit, one concrete habit that you could start building today that aligns with your natural strengths and interests?
Yeah, take some time to reflect on that.
Absolutely.
Maybe that's the first step you take
Exactly.
in shaping a game where you are inherently set up for greater satisfaction and achievement.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in the next episode of Chapters Unfolded.
See you next time.